From the Chicago Sun-Times newsroom, I'm Natasha Korecki, and this is Off Message, our weekly political talk show. Joining me this week, political reporter from NBC5, Marianne Ahern, political reporter from the Chicago Reader, Mick Dumke, and from Springfield, our Springfield Bureau Chief, Dave McKinney. This week, there's been a lot in the news regarding the Neighborhood Recovery Initiative, and particularly focusing on Dorothy Brown. And Dave, you've broken most of these stories. How does she get implicated here as far as getting involved with some of the funds from this anti-violence program?
Well, the bottom line is that money that Quinn was allotting toward anti-violence programs was filtering down into this nonprofit that Dorothy Brown's husband, and now we learned Dorothy Brown herself, had an intimate role in.
So what is the big picture problem with that?
It's certainly a perception issue. You know, the complaint against this $54 million program of Quinn's was that it was this, political slush fund. That's what the Republicans are calling it. But yet, we see, just in terms of the state and federal law enforcement inquiries into this program, we see them showing an interest in the Chicago area project. And certainly that then is a conduit to Benton Cook and potentially Dorothy Brown.
Mick, what do you think this means politically for Dorothy Brown? I mean, is it surprising that she's holding one role as a circuit court clerk and then another, has some involvement in a nonprofit where her husband's getting state money?
Yeah, it seems a little bit of a tangential role for her when she's supposed to be administering, the largest centralized court system in the country. And we can argue about whether that's being done well in the first place. So to take on a second job, I mean, right now on Mad Men, they're installing a computer system that looks similar to the ones being used over at the criminal courthouse.
There's a lot of complaints about that.
That's right. But, is this really going to have a serious impact on her political career? I don't know about that. I mean, last time she had what appeared to be a serious challenge from Alderman Rick Munoz, and she creamed him in the election. I just don't think a lot of people pay attention to the circuit court clerk. They don't know what that office does. And when it comes election time, I'm not sure that a lot of people are going through their list and saying, oh, now, has Dorothy Brown done her job as circuit court clerk? It doesn't look good, but I'm not sure that this is going to have a huge impact on her yet.
And we have the state's attorney here in Cook County, as well as the U.S. attorney out of Springfield, asking questions. And you would think that they would want to know more about her involvement as well as her husband's. That could lead, we don't know, and we're jumping many steps, but she could be a target of an investigation.
Governor Quinn was asked a little bit about Dorothy Brown. It was kind of interesting, his response.
What did you learn about Benton Cook and Dorothy Brown's involvement in this?
Reading the paper, I had no idea that either of those people were involved with that particular organization.
If nothing else, he's being kind of neglectful, I think, about this massive program that he launched in 2010. The Dorothy Brown storyline is not all bad for Quinn, because what it does kind of creates a diversion for Quinn, because the focus is on Dorothy Brown and not him specifically. He's going to make Dorothy Brown into a kind of political boogeyman, I think, to shift attention away from him.
And yet, Pat Quinn has always been, his commercial in 2010, his final ad, where, he sat there in the blue button-down shirt and just kind of looked at the camera and said, you know me, I'm Pat Quinn, and I'm going to tell it to you straight.
You know me.
What this does is really lays that question out there of, wait a second, I thought you were the honest guy. I thought that was your strong point of all the bad stuff going on in the state right now financially. We could always say, Pat Quinn, he's not going to lie to us. He's going to tell us the truth. He's a decent guy. And I think this shows like, ooh, wait a second, what's going on here? If you don't know about this program, you ought to know. There was an audit out several months ago. So when the audit came out, you better have read it, and you should have figured out what was going on. I think that answer of, hey, I don't know anything, I read it in the paper, it's craziness.
And it's going to continue to drip, drip, drip out, I have a feeling, as this election continues. Let's shift a little bit to the other story of the week. This week we saw a lot of Karen Lewis. She's been very, very vocal this week.
I'm sure whoever could win an election against the mayor will emerge shortly.
There's a lot of people dropping hints, once again, that she might run. What do you think?
I don't think she's running for mayor. She's, showing all of her weaponry in advance of negotiations for her, the contract negotiations that they're going to enter into starting next year during the mayoral election.
Right, which she noted, didn't she?
Exactly.
The contract on the very front cover says 2012 to 2015.
She is someone who has been so antagonistic with the mayor, has really stood up to him, kind of enjoys that role, doesn't shy away from it. I don't see her running for mayor, but I wonder her support for someone else could help or hurt that someone else, whether it be Tony Preckwinkle, Alderman Fioretti, whoever it may be, because she is such a lightning rod. You can't just say, wow, Karen Lewis, if she's behind you, you're going to win. I think you got to watch that.
But don't you kind of need her?
I think you do. I actually disagree with Marianne a little bit. I think that you have Karen Lewis on your team. She fires up segments of the electorate that you need to get to the polls. The African American vote is going to be essential for any candidate who takes on Rahm Emanuel. His poll numbers are low there, and this, the turnout there has been on a steady decline since Harold Washington was the mayor. So you have someone who can excite the black community in particular, the Latino community that's affected by a lot of the school policies. I think that is just a major plus for any challenger to Rahm.
But again, her being vocal this week, you think that is just sort of a prelude to negotiations are coming up, and I'm going to start this campaign for...
I think it's primarily about school politics at this point. She is, basically setting the stage for these contract negotiations. Mayor Manos had a narrative about we're in this pension crisis, we're going to have to ask everybody's sacrifice.
As it relates to making sure that we have security for the teachers in their retirement, I also want to make that done because I want to make sure they have a pension, but we also don't do it by taking anything away from our pupils.
And she's kind of saying, wait a second, this is kind of your problem. We might help you with your problem.
This is an opportunity for them to say, you know what? We're part of the city. We love the city. We'd like to see the city work.
But just remember, we're willing to walk out. We have a 3-year deal. It's up next year. You're happening to be running for re-election at the same time. We're ready to go.
And they've done it before.
And they've done it before.
Of course, then he closed 50 schools after that. So, all right. Well, before we close, let's go to quotes of the week. Dave, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'll circle back to Dorothy Brown. She was asked about the scrutiny of her, and she said, "It is basically, unfortunately, a political witch hunt on me."
Okay, Mick, why don't we go to you?
I'm going to circle back to Karen Lewis. This is from her speech to the City Club earlier this week. She said, "Our members don't want to wind up in poverty because somebody who just rode into town wants to take away their livelihoods." Somebody just rode into town. Rahm Emanuel, of course, spending his career before this in Washington, and then, as all of his critics like to bring up as often as possible, went to high school in Wilmette. So.
Carrying on with that Rahm Emanuel theme, there was a piece written about him this week that really took him to task, called him a walking personality disorder, that he was beyond bossy, that his audacity did not match his accomplishments. And so when he was out with the media in kind of an oddly staged situation, almost had to shout out the question to him. I said, "Hey, did you read that? What did you think?" And he tried to joke and say, "Oh, my wife agrees. My wife agrees I am a walking personality disorder."
And if anyone would know,
Yes.
it would be her.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to switch a little bit to a case that's in federal court. John Thomas, they're trying to revoke his bond now because he violated his house arrest by trying to have a little tryst with his mistress. And when his infamous defense attorney was asked about this, he said, quote, "It got a little hot and heavy." That one's going to turn out to be more fun. Well, thank you very much to our panel this week, and join us next week on